I think we're all familiar with what a dragon is. A tough-to-kill legendary scaled armored flying monster who's got bat-like wings and is able to breathe fire. Thing is though, this is a dragon, but so is this and this. Well, let's look into this, shall we? Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. Dragons are present in the myths of many different cultures throughout the world. They're a sort of common denominator, if you will. And although some distinguishing features are present that set apart one tradition from the other, we could say that they are a link between very different civilizations throughout the globe. The two main traditions being the Western European dragon and the Chinese dragon. So today we will consider and we will study together the morphology and comparative mythology of both these realities. However, in this video we will also explore other types of dragons, for example the Slavic dragon, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese dragons, and also ancient African dragons, namely the Egyptian dragon-like god Apophis. And then we will go all the way back to ancient Rome and ancient Greece. The first thing that we need to take into consideration when we want to compare a Western European dragon and an Eastern, Far Eastern dragon is the shape of its body. A Western European dragon tends to look like a giant reptile. It has, as we said, bat-like wings, and it has normally 4 legs, although we will get back to the number of legs later. When we look at a Far Eastern dragon instead, it looks more like a serpent rather than a reptile. Normally it's wingless and it has around 4 legs. So we said the Chinese dragons look more like serpents, but originally Western dragons also looked more like serpents. In fact, it is in the Middle Ages that legs and wings are added. And if you look at the etymology of the word dragon in English, it comes from Latin, the word Draco, draconis, which itself comes from Greek. Now in modern Greek you normally say drakos, but in ancient Greek it was something more like drákōn, and it meant a serpent, a big serpent or a water serpent. And what's interesting about European mythology and European dragons is that the number of legs is very important, because if you only have 2 legs, you're not talking about a dragon, because a dragon should at least have 4. If you only have 2 legs, then you're in the presence or in front of a wyvern. Worth of notice is the element to which these respective dragons are linked to. In the West, dragons are linked to the element of fire, whereas in the East, dragons are linked to the element of water. Another interesting difference is where these dragons are supposedly living. As far as the Eastern traditions are concerned, dragons are supposed to be living in rivers, lakes and ponds on top of mountains, whereas the Western dragons will be living also on rivers, but then caves and lairs. But perhaps the most important difference between these two kinds of dragons is the fact that Western dragons are normally considered to be monsters, supernatural fiends that need to be overcome and killed by either heroes or deities, whereas Far Eastern dragons are often revered as representatives of the primal forces of nature, and they are associated with wisdom and longevity. In the old poem Beowulf, dragons are said to breathe fire or to be poisonous. They are represented to be hoarding treasures, and in early European literature, the number of legs varied from none to 4 or more. The concept of dragons being slain by heroes or deities can be traced to the Near East lore, and even the biblical Leviathan could be considered to be a sort of dragon. The same with the narrative of the Greek god Apollon and the Christian narrative of Michael the Archangel. But it is the advent of Christianity which locks this aura of malevolent entities to the dragons, as for instance, the red Welsh dragon was seen as benevolent originally. Pagan sites and springs which were associated with dragons were later associated with Saint George or Michael. Hence, we can say that early, original European dragons could also be benevolent, similar to the Chinese counterpart. The Slavic tradition is again different. For example, some of the peculiarities of Russian dragons is that dragons would have heads in multiples of 3, and if you don't manage to cut off all the heads, the ones that were cut off will grow back again. In Ukraine, dragons have 3 heads and spit fire. The Persian dragon is said to have bright eyes and is often depicted upon banners of war, which is actually something we find also in late empire of the Romans, as they did use Draco as symbols on their emblems. Japan adopts dragons in the 9th century through the spread of Buddhism. Japanese dragons are often associated with rainfall, bodies of water, and invariably possess 3 claws. The Vietnamese people instead consider themselves to be descendant from a dragon and a fairy. Dragons bring rain, essential for agriculture, and it represents the empire and prosperity. Korean dragons are said to be bringers of rain and associated with clouds. They're also considered capable of human-like emotions such as devotion, kindness, and gratitude. They occasionally carry an orb, considered to be a source of power. And according to the myth, all of them are lesser dragons, which need to find and catch one of these orbs in order to change into actual real dragons. In Egypt, Apep or Apophis is the deity of chaos and is always represented as a dragon. It is the opponent of light. We already find a representation of Apophis in the 8th dynasty, and we know that Apophis was actually honored in one of the names of the king of the 14th dynasty. It's considered to be the greatest enemy of Ra, the solar deity, and was made of flint. Another interesting aspect is that of blood. Blood changes. The blood of a dragon has completely different situations depending on what culture we're talking about. For example, in the German tradition, we've got 2 possibilities. In the case of Siegfried, we know that when he bathed in blood, his skin became invulnerable. And still in the German tradition, we know that Ornit's armor became invulnerable when bathed in dragon's blood. In the Slavic tradition, the blood of a dragon is considered to be a vile thing, so much so that even Mother Earth refuses to accept in its own womb the blood of a dragon. So if you slay a dragon and its blood its blood falls on the floor, it will remain on surface forever. Ultimately, in Beowulf, the blood of a dragon is considered to be acid, to have acidic properties. So when a hero cuts or slays a dragon, he needs to be very careful because he might be hit by the dragon's blood and lose his life. Dragons are present in India as well. We've got Indian dragons, we've got even Assamese specific dragons, and for example, an example of these would be Vridra, who is basically a Naga. But I will talk more about this with my cousin, who has actually a PhD in Indian mythology, Indian culture and anthropology, so I will invite her over for this. Finally, I'd like to address the Chinese dragon. As we said, a dragon for the Chinese is a very important entity. He's not only a benevolent god, but he's also at the very top of the hierarchy of animals. And Chinese believed to be descendants of dragons. And dragons are often used as a representative or as a representation of imperial power. There are many proverbs and idiomatic expressions that are linked to dragons. A proverb, for example, would be the following: Wang zi cheng long, Wang zi cheng long, which means that I hope that your son will be like a dragon. Dragons have been in China for a very long time. The first representation of a dragon belongs to the 5th millennium before Christ. And it will be always associated with good luck, potent control over waters, and strength. Alright then, noble ones, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. I will see you tomorrow for my next upload. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. A dragon! Chinese, okay. Okay, go focusing.
Chinese. Okay. Run.
However, in this video, we will also explore other types of dragons. For example, the Slavic dragon, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese dragons, but also ancient African dragons, namely the Egyptian. The Egyptian, che mi devo ricordare, the Egyptian, è complicato, the Egyptian dragon-like gods. No, the Egyptian dragon-like god Apophis. Eccola come. The Egyptian dragon-like god Apophis, che la voglio fare con il Chinese o Far Eastern dragon, is the shape of its body. A Western... bappino.